So, welcome to this month's First Friday with the Thought Leader. My name is Janice Kaye. I am the co-founder of Corentus, and I'm psyched for everyone to be here. We welcome the members of our global community, professionals advancing team effectiveness. So many of the people who are on the call come from many of these partnership organizations that we've worked with in the past, and we are happy to have you. And with that, I bring you our thought leader for today, Ms. Rae Ringel and Alexander, to introduce her and to have a conversation.
Great. So I will kick it off for us today and share with you how we're going to actually run this session. But first, I'd like to say, before I do the formal introduction of Rae Ringel, and I feel emotional about this, but Rae Ringel is a very dear friend and has been a friend for many, many, many years. Rae is somebody that I look up to and that I really see as one of the masters in this field. No joke. So it's a privilege to have the conversation with you today, Rae. We're going to have a great back and forth. And what we're going to do is Rae and I will have a conversation, which I will be leading through a set of questions that will last about 20, 25 minutes. And then we're going to give all of you an opportunity to ask questions and interact directly with Rae. So write your questions down during those 20, 25 minutes, and we'll give you a chance to do that Q&A, which will be, I am sure, very rich. The formal introduction. So Rae Ringel is the president of the Ringel Group, which is an executive coaching and leadership development organization and a globally recognized thought leader in facilitation and learning design. She is one of the leading trainers of facilitators worldwide, shaping the field through her work in meeting design, stakeholder engagement, and translating in-room experiences into dynamic online environments. With extensive experience across sectors and settings, Rae has set the standard for creating meaningful and impactful convenings that help teams connect more deeply, work more effectively, and achieve shared success. Is that right, Rae?
I hope so.
Before we dive in, anything you want to say just to kick it off and introduce yourself?
I see so many people on this call that I love and admire and cherish. And I think for the people I don't know, my philosophy in life is strangers are just friends I haven't met yet. So I I look forward to connecting both here and in other ways. Um, I just feel like this is the right conversation in the right moment, and always grateful to be in dialogue with you.
Love you, Rae.
Hmm. Love you back.
All right, so let's kick it off at a very high level. I have a couple of questions that I'm really curious about that I'm sure many others are, which is what is your, and it's sort of three little mini questions stacked together for you. So the first is, how do you define the field of facilitation? What are we talking about here today? I think that's important. And what got you into it? And when did you get into it? Like what happened?
Great question. I mean, and the most basic level, I will start with the definition of facilitation that should speak to you because the root of the word facilitation or facilitator is French. Do we know what that root is?
Facilité.
Facile, right? To
Facile.
ease or to soothe. I always think of you because, je parle français un petit peu. So, facile, like right to ease, to soothe, to make smooth. And the idea of facilitation is to work with groups and teams or even individuals to alleviate a process and to move a process forward. So for me, facilitation is about productive change in people, in teams, and systems. I think that when people gather, they come to meetings, um, retreats, conferences, but especially meetings, they often leave and say, I don't know exactly what happened, but I do know that I just lost an hour of my life, right? No, not okay. When someone is facilitated, something has to change in that experience. That could be a feeling, that could be a thought, that could be a behavior, but what is changed as a result of that experience? And that really has to do with the design and the facilitation that's done in the room. And so at its purest sense, when people say who should be a facilitator, and I say anyone who is in the business of people, it's just that simple. So
Mm,
whether you have managers in an organization or you have Taylor Swift on a stage or you have, whatever it is, a teacher in a classroom, if you are in the business of gathering humans, then you are in a potential role to be a facilitator. And that's why I think the skill set is relevant for anyone who works with people. And starting the younger, the better. Really teaching people at a young age how to gather and what that looks like is very important. I came into it, I mean, I think that I think I was always
yeah.
drawn to this as an athlete and someone who, in playing team sports, I always migrated, I always moved to that role of thinking about team health. Like when the coach wasn't, when they were really focused on skills, I was always into how are we treating each other? How are we doing? How's our sportsmanship? I was always drawn to the temperature and the mood and the tone of people around me. And then I think also, growing up and then moving through college, I moved from team sports to an a cappella group, which I think is like this incredible example of sort of organizational life and teams and systems and tending to group health and group harmony and group acrimony. So I was always drawn to it. But I think where I really started getting into it is as I trained in organizational behavior and as a coach and getting into training in organizations, I noticed that it all felt very technical to me. It all felt very like, here's the skill and learn the skill and practice the skill. And we weren't really like lifting up the hood and understanding what was getting in the way of some of the skills and the tools. So kind of back to like what you say all the time and what I'm sure you've taught everyone on this call, the inner game runs the outer game. So I felt like there's just a lot of outer game going on in organizational life. And as a facilitator, I got really curious as to what are we not talking about in the room? What are some of the barriers? What are some of the obstacles that are not allowing us to reach our goal or achieve these skills? And so I remember, wow, many years ago, I was asked to design a 4-day facilitation training for a bunch of international NGOs who are just doing incredible work in the world. And I thought, sure, I can do that, but I hadn't really taught it before. So I just sort of pulled together instinctually what I knew from the coaching world, what I knew from the training world, and put together a program on facilitation, which really had to do with your presence in the room, with designing facilitation, with how to work with dynamics, with how to pivot, which is such an important part of the facilitation world. And it just sort of took off from there. What was interesting is, and I think as it will relate to so many people on this call, is I was working with so many coaches who inevitably, when you're a coach in an organization, there almost always comes a time where your client says, you should really come to our board meeting or our annual meeting or our senior leadership team could really use you. And the coach would say, great, but the coach didn't necessarily have that skill set. They were coaches. And so I started teaching courses to coaches on facilitation so they could put that into their toolkit and add it. And it really sort of took off from there, which is when I started the certification program and here we are today.
Wow, that was a rich, there's so much in there to unpack. I don't even know where to start.
I have to do say this. I should have brought it here today, but my mother got me an amazing gift, which I'll
Yeah.
explain to you many years ago. It's this little black and white picture in a frame, and I'm sitting in the edge of my chair with a Wonder Woman shirt and leg warmers. So now I think you all know how old I am. This picture was taken in the mid to late 70s, and I'm sitting there like this, and there's like a bunch, I must have been in sixth grade. There's a bunch of kindergartners sitting in front of me, and it's engraved my first facilitation. And I love that I was in a Wonder Woman shirt and leg warmers, but it was this kind of thing that I was just like always really drawn to. How do we engage groups and move them towards a different outcome? Like from a very young age, I was very pulled to that.
Yeah, got it. All right. Well, I know that in prepping for this call today, we said that you would share some of your facilitation gems. So I want to make sure that you get a chance to share that with the group. I have a question for you, and I want to get to the inner game and I want to get to pivoting, which are two important pieces we've talked about. But what I'd love to know about is what makes a great facilitator? What makes a great facilitation? What are the skills? What are you teaching? What are you looking for? What do we need?
Mm. So I think that the number one most important skill as a facilitator is to operate with the mindset of being in service to the room. And the facilitators that I want to work with are the ones that spend a lot of time preparing, immersing with clients, finding out what they need and what they want, and coming up with a really thoughtful design. And then walking into the room, and if within, 5 to 7 minutes, or maybe it's 20 minutes, you realize the room needs something else, the ability to turn over that agenda and let go and go into uncharted lands.
Right.
And I think that's a rare trait to find because it's scary. But when you don't do that and you only stay to like what you designed and what you planned in your own agenda, then it's more about being in service to yourself and feeling comfortable with your game plan as opposed to being very attuned to what's happening in the room. And I think that for me, that is something that it's hard to teach because it takes confidence, it takes guts, it takes a certain mindset. But if we don't operate in that way, then we're in it for ourselves. I always say that in a way, the goal of the facilitator is to be forgotten. We want people in that room to remember what they experienced and how they changed and how they were challenged, not how savvy the facilitator was. I mean, we don't really want people to forget us, but we kind of do. So how do we not be about ourselves, be about the room? Now, hopefully, if you've done your homework, that's not going to happen because you've done enough immersion with your people to really understand what they want and what they need, and they are partnering with you in creating that facilitation. But at the end of the day, you can be a great facilitator and have a great design, and then human beings show up. And then there's that with all their stuff. And by the way, we are those human beings too, with emotion, with skin in the game, with ego, with bad behavior, with all of that. And so, how do we really be in service to our room? So that is, and the pivoting thing is very hard because what if you have a client who's contracted you for X and now your room wants Y? So how do you know how to do that? And there's lots of tools and skills around doing that, but it's the openness to the pivot. It's the openness to the pivot. So I think that the skills of a great facilitator, yes, John, I just saw that comment. It's a lot like team coaching. Like really being a facilitator is you're seeing, but you're using your peripheral vision and you're listening, hopefully at level 2, level 3, but you're also hearing for what's not being said. So you should at the end of a facilitation be exhausted, like full body, all your senses exhausted in the best way because you have just worked. It's like a full body experience
Yes,
to
it
really
is.
be attuned to what's happening in the room.
So, my experience as a facilitator is that pivoting is extraordinarily important and it requires inner game, but it also requires technique and tools. Do you have any advice on how to pivot well,
Yeah,
Ray?
sure. So, there are a lot of roles of a facilitator. One of the really important roles is the namer. Okay, is the person who names. So, kind of when you think about adaptive leadership, like being on the dance floor and being on the balcony. So, the role of the facilitator is to name what they're noticing and observing. And it could be as I'm noticing the energy in the room has really gone down, or I'm noticing 3 people are doing all the work, or I'm noticing only the men are speaking and I'm wondering where the women are. Like, and it's not and I'm not assigning judgment to it. I'm just naming what I'm observing and what I'm noticing. And then hopefully, like the room is going to do the work and sort of play back what's actually happening. But the power of the pivot is also saying, I'm noticing where there's not a lot of energy in terms of the direction that we're going, right? And not a lot of participation. And I'm wondering if we need to pivot, right? So just to play back, this is what I'm sensing, this is what I'm noticing, sort of holding up the mirror and then relying on the room to respond and to do that work. Now, sometimes you can't fully pivot because let's say a decision has to be made on that
Mm,
on that day, right? But the noticing and the naming and the observing is also part of holding a room accountable for what's actually happening and being the person who can play it back and ask the room what sense they make of it, why this might be happening, and do we need to move in a different direction? I notice there's something that is being avoided. Or even I'm noticing this agreement that we have up on the wall, right? Everyone is breaking. Interesting to me. What do you make of that? And that's where you're sort of like activating the coach in you to be doing that. But that is going to be the data that you need to have before making that pivot.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes in or often when I'm co-facilitating, and I make a huge case for co-facilitation, I think it's so important, is we will something will happen in the room, and we had a particular closing that we were going to do, but my co-facilitator and I huddle in the hallway and say, they need something that's much more energizing. The one that we had
Yes.
planned is going to be a Debbie Downer, right? Or they actually, I think they need some reflection time. They need some journal time. And maybe we'll close with like a declaration or one word. Like we'll pivot together in the hallway because we have a strong sense in our gut of what the room needs. We'll do that. If that's with a room of facilitators we're training, we will do the closing and then we will pull back the curtain and explain to them why we made that pivot. Because we also want them to learn, like we want to like put a, disc into our head and explain to them like why we made that decision and what went behind that decision. If I'm just with a client, I don't usually explain to them why I did it. I just do it.
A colleague and I, about 3 weeks ago, ran a workshop where we were going to be running a set of role plays at the end of 2 days, and we felt the group was exhausted. And so we pivoted and actually gave them materials and said, get up and act it out. And the energy immediately went up. They enjoyed the rest of the workshop, and we pivoted to a completely different design.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes it's how you're asking the room to pivot, but a lot of the times it's your own pivot as a facilitator. So just
Yes.
on Tuesday, I was working with an organization in DC that's very involved in politics. That is, in particular, I was working with the climate part of this organization, which has basically been shut down. I mean, I walk into the room and you could feel like the depletion of energy. And so all of a sudden, I don't know where this came from, but I said, we're going to open with a humble brag. And each person is going to go around the room, and I want you to share something that you are super proud of. It could be at work, it could be in life, it could be physical, it could be emotional. And the more over the top, the better. Like you get more points if you're like the thing that you feel like, I can't say that in public. That's what I want you to say. And we went around and everyone did their humble brag, although one person said that their dog lost 2 pounds. And I was like, I'm sorry, that doesn't count. Like it has to be about you, not about, or if you starved your dog, maybe. But um, and it was just, I said, like, in the world that we're living in right now, like we need to be celebrating each other all the time, the big things and the little things. And we need to remember that because like so many of you are operating from a place of deficit as opposed to asset, right? It's like, let's lift the assets up before we do this learning. And it was just like, and it was really, and I didn't know that I was going to do that. But I just walked into the room and just felt this, like I
Interesting.
felt the heaviness.
All right. So I love these little gems I know you have a toolkit that is the size. And I know that when you think about the facilitation, there's the prep and the meeting design, which is extraordinarily important. There's the execution of that design, and then there's follow-up. I'm wondering about prep.
The most important gem that I can give you, which is so basic and so profound, comes right out of adult learning theory. And it's called the ABC objectives. And they stand for, maybe someone can write this in the chat. A is affective, B is behavioral, and C is cognitive. And it's basically saying the A is effective. So by the end of this meeting or this retreat or this facilitation or this conversation, how do we want people to feel? Right? Do we want them to feel energized? Do we want them to feel motivated? Do we want them to feel inspired? Do we want them to feel some productive discomfort, some healthy tension? That is an okay emotion for people to feel, productive discomfort. Then I go to the C, typically, which is the cognitive. What do they need to know? What's the learning piece? Is it a tool? Is it a belief? Is it a change? Is it a policy or protocol? And then the B is the behaviors. What do we want them to be able to do? And the doing could be in the meeting, and that's where your verbs come in. Like we want them to vote, decide, brainstorm and select, determine, whatever. Or the behavior could be as a result. We want them to enlist, to enroll, to teach, to, right? And there's always an A, a B, and a C. Always a couple of them. But you cannot move forward unless you have these things in place. So what I pair with that is, Lewis Carroll said in Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. I love that when you're backpacking in Europe. That is not facilitation. It's not coaching either. It is if you know where you're going, many roads can take you there. It's just like in coaching when you set up your agreement and you determine your destination, right? Or in facilitation, this is where we're going. Then there's so many different modalities and tools and questions and ways of getting there. But how do you set out on your journey unless you know that destination? It's very much like Waze or Google Maps, right? Like set the destination and then figure out your course. So your ABCs, that is your destination. That's where you're going. It might change in the middle, just like it does in the coaching conversation, but you don't set out on that facilitation journey unless you have that North Star,
Right.
which are your A, B, and C's.
All right, I have time for one more question for me, and then we're going to open it up to the full group. My last question for you, and this is the one, it's kind of a combination, and that hopefully through the group's questions, we'll get into more techniques that you have during execution.
Sure.
So all of you, please feel free to go in that direction with Ray. But mine is, we talk a lot about the inner game, state of mind, clarity. What does it mean to you? And do you have any tips to, because I know sometimes facilitation, my imposter syndrome takes over. I get nervous. I get insecure. All of a sudden, I feel like they don't like me. They don't like, and I start to get knocked off. And I can sit down while they're working, going, "Oh boy, breathe, breathe, breathe." But sometimes it's not enough. Is there anything you do that you want to suggest? How do you get the inner game?
Oh my gosh. Do we have 5 more hours? Okay. Okay. So a couple things. I can think of three things
Yeah.
quickly that I'll share with you. So
Okay.
first of all, my mindset in facilitation and in coaching is I fall in love with the participants in the room. I have to fall in love with all, even the ones that are annoying me, right? This idea of like, I want to fall in love with the people who I'm in the room with. So in a way, when I'm facilitating, it is an escape for me. Like I'm immersed, I'm losing myself in the world of these participants. And it's actually like, for someone like me who's so sensitive to what's going on in the world and, my own family, like I actually find myself, I'll never forget after I had babies, I was someone who had a lot of postpartum depression. And I remember that one of my ways through it was coaching because I just lost myself in someone's story and got out of my own. Right. So it's the same thing with facilitation. Like everything else quiets for me because I'm so attuned to what's in the room. So I actually find that it's super helpful with my state of mind because I'm just the only thing that matters to me is the health and welfare of the people who are in the room. So that's number one, which is sort of falling in love with the people in the room. Second thing is never apologizing. The
Mm,
second I say to someone, we're going to do a little activity, or it might feel like, it might feel like you're back in grade school, you're done. You're done. How can I get Fortune 100 CEOs to play with Play-Doh? This is how. I say to them, we're in the prototyping phase of the design cycle. I'm going to have you go over to that table. There's a set of materials. Take the ones that you like, and you have 10 minutes to build your prototype. And they go to the table and they see popsicle sticks and Play-Doh and all these things. And I see like the drool at the end of I see how excited they are. But I never belittle or minimize. I
yeah.
never like show up small. I just introduce what we're doing. I don't call it an icebreaker. I don't call it a game. I call it a modality or I call it an activity. And I just say, like, here's what we're doing without an apology. Because at the end of the day,
Mm,
people want to play and they want to be creative. The second I apologize for it or minimize it, they then get all funky with it. So that's what helps my imposter syndrome is just to like name this is what we're doing and this is the purpose of what we're doing instead of defending and justifying it.
beautiful.
And the last
I love that, Ray.
and the last thing is, and we are our biggest stumbling blocks to people that are like, my chemical engineers will never go for that. I'm like, really? I think they will. Here's how. Right? We are our greatest stumbling block. And then the third thing, Alexander, is wow. I mean, with what's going on in the world and I have 4 kids, like I have a crazy crazy life and my whole life before 9 o'clock is like I'm just trying to survive my household. So there are practices that I have to put in place to be fit to facilitate. It's the same thing for fit for coaching. There are things I need to eat and drink. I mean, nothing like I'm not talking alcohol, I'm talking coffee. Like there are things I need to eat. I'm a little, the way that I center is less through breathing and stillness. I center through movement. So exercise is a big thing, music is a big thing for me. And I probably the biggest thing that I do is I always have paper near me in the
Oh,
room and in Zoom. And I'm constantly, when I have any thought in my head, whether it's a feeling or emotion or go get the dry cleaning or sign up Lior for hip hop, like anything that comes in my brain, I have to write it down.
Yeah,
Confucius said that even the palest ink is better than the sharpest memory. So I have to keep clearing the highway of all of the stuff so I can stay like present and focused, and all that other junk will be there for me when I'm done. It's such an old school basic technique, but it keeps me super present and super calm.
beautiful. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right, so I would love to invite all of you. Raise your hand if you have a question for Ray. And Janice, would you be kind enough to monitor the hands raised and we'll have you call people out? That'd be great.
Renika.
Yes, my question is around case studies.
Mm.
Have you ever written a case study around a session that you facilitated? I have one that I am dying to write and don't really know the structure. I was going to put it in ChatGPT to figure out how to put it together, but I want to get the view of the facilitator, the participants, and the two participants. There were um, Black participants and there were non-Black participants. And it was the
Hmm.
first time that we had something like this where the majority of the participants were Black. And it was it was different for all. So I'd like to write a case study about it.
Well, I think you absolutely should. And I would ask for the purpose of what, right? Is
Mhm.
it for your learning? Do you want to share the case study for others to think about how you would facilitate across diversity or how you would lift the unheard voices? Or like, what's your primary purpose for writing the case study and who will it go to?
Okay, thank you.
But I think absolutely, and we need more of that. We need people who are willing to be vulnerable and say, this is what happened. Here's where I think I did well. Here was a miss. Here was like, it's so important to work with that live data. And I'd love to read it. So if you want to run it by me, I would love to read it.
Thank you.
Same,
Great.
Thank
same.
It will be good.
It'll be good.
All right, Kelly, then Jonathan.
Great. Hi, Ray. I was in your program years ago. I still use all your tools. I have a question around time management. What do you advise doing when the group is having a great, juicy conversation that is likely very important, and there are still agenda items that you promised and they very much want to get to, but time is running out? What do you
Great
do?
question. Great
If
question.
yeah, it's a great question. If there are other items that you have to get to, you just have to name that and name like, I feel really torn because there's this has so much juice and so much energy right now, and we all committed to making those decisions. Look, you could put it out to a vote saying if we can defer those decisions till tomorrow or another day, I'd love to continue this. But if it has to be done, I would commit to saying we need more time for this topic. At the end of this meeting, we're going to set up another huddle or another gathering to keep to keep going and to finish this thread. You do lose some of the momentum, but on the other hand, you keep your commitment and the accountability to the other agenda items. You just can't let it like drift off and never come back to it. So what I like to do is, as an immediate follow-up, come back and make a dedicated meeting just to that topic item, that topic, so that you can dig more into it. And then people feel really grateful that you've done the follow-up.
That's great.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you for that permission.
Mhm. You always blame it on me. Ray told me that we have to
Yeah.
stop. That's totally fine. They're like,
Right.
That's great. Jonathan?
Yeah, I had a question about when sponsors or players in the middle seem to think you can just show up and facilitate, and haven't built in, the upfront discussions as part of the process. I mean, maybe you never run into that, but I'm wondering how much do you push back? How much do you just do what you need to? And what are your recommendations around that?
well, Jonathan, are you saying that you've seen them before and they haven't done it well? Is that what
No,
we're
I'm
talking?
saying somebody comes and says, would you facilitate this group? It's going to be this many people. They're going to be here, and seem to assume that that should be enough information.
Oh, oh, okay, got it, got it. Yeah, so I have certain standards of practice in terms of what I need to know before I walk into the room. I mean, Jonathan, I typically get calls around November or December where people are like, "We have this extra money for professional development. We don't know what we want. Can you come and facilitate something?" And it's like, I could take the money and run, but that's not going to be a successful engagement unless I know what their goals are, what their purpose is. And I should have said this before, is that I have sort of a rule for my business that Everyone I facilitate gets a survey, but I have to interview 30% of participants who are going to be in the room. So
Okay.
if that's 12 people, that's, at least 4 people. And if it's 100 people, that's 33.3 people. That doesn't mean one-on-one interviews. That might be group calls. But I have to have immersion interviews with 30% of the people coming, or else how do I know how to design something that fits within their needs? And sometimes people are like, oh, I don't know. But at the end of the day, they're super grateful because I'm not pulling a PowerPoint off the shelf and changing the title page. I'm customizing everything that I'm doing. When I work with lawyers, I often say that I want to speak to their clients. And they're like, oh, we can't do that. I was like, well, how do we know how these lawyers are being received and perceived unless I talk to their clients? So even when there's pushback, I feel really good about this being my practice because the facilitation is so much more real and so much more authentic. If they push back too much on me and don't want to give me that information, I'm not the right person and I probably walk from it. And that's a decision you have to make. It feels to me like I would just go in you know, with no sense of what the group needs, and it just doesn't feel right.
We're going to do one from chat. So when facilitating leaders and they go quiet, or disengage, basically you hear crickets during a session. What is the technique to use with them? What do you suggest?
Oh, it's so good. Is this typically on Zoom when you're like talking into a black hole, or can also be in the room?
I've seen it
Either.
both ways.
So I'll tell you my two different approaches. If it's in the room, it depends on my rapport with a group. If it's in the room and no one's answering, I will literally say, people, I am working way too hard, or I am not getting paid enough for this. Like, what is happening? And then I use that as a way to name, um, there's really a lack of participation. Let's talk about what's going on right here. And that's a pivot. That's a pivot when no one is participating. Do we need to move on? Right? Are people, what's happening? I sort of start naming what's in the room and actually facilitate that moment. If it's on Zoom, I want to share with you the Ringel method, which is, I think, pretty foolproof, and you can steal it and attach your own name to it. So let's say I ask all of you to, an exercise, and I have you write something down, and I say, okay, I'd love for someone to share their results. So then I do the one sip pause, which looks like this. Okay. So the one sip pause has been scientifically proven by me to be the perfect amount of time where someone can like think about what they want to say and then take themselves off mute. Okay, that's the Ringel method. Sometimes it's coffee. This happens to be Crystal Light. All right. Now, what happens when no one talks? When no one talks, exactly what you're saying. Crickets, nothing. So I like to wait in silence. And I'll tell you, someone who really taught me about sitting in silence is Alexander. Because I don't know if you've ever been in a room with him, but he often walks in and looks at every single person in the room in the eye in silence. And I'm always like, when is he going to talk? So I've had to practice years in getting comfortable with silence. So I wait about 6 to 8 seconds where it starts getting really uncomfortable. And then this is what I say. I say, okay, here's what's happening. No one's volunteering. Everyone's starting to feel anxious for me because no one's volunteering. And I just want to let you know that I don't feel any anxiety. I'm so good over here. So you just take your time, and whenever you're ready, you do you. 9 out of 10 times, somebody laughs and then they participate. But the truth is, it's very deep because they all are feeling anxious for me, and I'm not feeling anxious. I'm happy to have the break. So I just name exactly what's going on in the room. Someone laughs and participates. Now, if they still don't, after my brilliant Ringel method, then I say to them, it seems like we don't need to spend any more time on this. We're good. Let's go on. I'm not going to punish you. You didn't hurt my feelings. You're giving me information that you don't need to tap this anymore. Let's go to the next slide. Try the Ringel method. It's foolproof. But don't laugh. Just don't laugh because they'll see right through you. I'll just be like, I'm good.
Sarah, then Jim, and then Sharon.
I love it. I'm totally using that tactic.
Oh my God, the Ironside method. It's
sure.
so
I'm
intense.
gonna call it that. I'm gonna call it that. Yeah, I hope you branded it first, so I won't try to to brand it. My question is about the distractor. I have got someone on a team, I secretly call them the squirrel, right? Where you're like, okay, we're paying attention to this topic, we're heading to this outcome, I've got a purpose, and then they take the conversation down the side path.
Yeah.
And I've tried the naming it. Oh, it sounds like we have a lot of energy for this other topic. Where do we want to use our time, right? I tried that, but their topic is so off topic and self-serving or distracting or what have you. And I've tried the talking to that person at break around, let's try to pay attention to the topic that seems most relevant for everyone. What do I do with the squirrel person who wants to get off topic?
Great question.
And you can use that one. You can use squirrel.
Squirrel is very generous. So with the squirrel, so first of all, I do think that if it's someone who you facilitate often, there is going to be a moment where you want to give some feedback. Remember about like feedback's about observable behavior and impact on the system. So like you're going to want to sit down and just name that role that they tend to be playing and the impact that it's having either on you or on the team. That's going to be a really important conversation. But what you do in the moment is, and this is really interesting, Sarah, it goes back to the ABCs. One of the reasons why the ABCs are so important and why you want to project them on the screen or in the room is that you don't want to get into a power play where Sarah is dismissing the squirrel, right? And you have all the power to say what you're saying isn't relevant or we're not going to go there because that could set up a dynamic where you put that squirrel in an emotional bunker by shutting them down and then they're out for the rest of the session. So what you want to do is you want to re-lift up the ABCs and say, said squirrel, if you remember what we're talking about right now is we're really focused on X, Y, and Z, which is why we're not going to dive into that topic right now. The ABCs become the filter through which topics either come in or out. I call it like the moat around the castle, your protective shield. So instead of you dismissing a comment, you re-lift up the ABCs, your purpose, and the ABCs decide if you're going down that rabbit hole or that squirrel hole or not. And then, the next thing I'll do, Sarah, is say, but I understand this is really important to you. Can we take a couple minutes during the break or after to talk about that a little bit more? Now, people will say to me, but Rae, you've just given up your break time or your precious like restorative time to entertain that person. And I say, you know what? I'm in the business of people. So if I need to spend 2 extra minutes with the squirrel to make them feel seen and heard, that's my job. That's my job. And I know that that's my job. And so that is where also the ABCs become so important. So you don't get into that power dynamic with any particular participant. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. That's very grounding. This is where we're heading. This is the moat. I'm tending to the castle. Yes.
Tending to the castle.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Jim.
I would say you're great. I would love to go out to dinner with you and hang out. And you're like a stand-up comedian and very thoughtful simultaneously. Hey, how do I name this? We had myself and 2 others were facilitating a 20-person 2-day event. Middle to the end of the first day, the person who was the client who had their leadership above them in the room had a meltdown, shouted, stormed out of the room. And in the moment, I chose not to do anything. I just let the break. I let it get right to a break in a moment and said everybody that was doing good. And then I went and got the person back. But it was one of those high wire moments where like, oh shit, now what do I do?
Totally.
How do you name that? I mean, I just used somatic methods. I chose not to engage. I helped the person down, thinking, what would Alexandra do? And I just got them to breathe and be calm. Didn't say anything about the outburst, and I just said, "Are you ready to go back?" And she goes, "Yeah, okay, I'm good now."
Yeah. So first of all, I really appreciate that you did the somatic piece because that is like a major amygdala hijack happening, in the moment. And we have, full sessions on this called The Joy of Working with People and what happens when someone like drops a grenade or attacks someone else or storms out of the room. So I really appreciated how you grounded yourself in that. And I think that what's really, really important in that situation is you have to tend to the person who that happened to. And I'm glad that you did that. The only thing that I would offer you is I think there's repair that has to be done in the room because the rest of the room is left feeling like what just happened and is that person okay? And then there's sidebar conversations. And I wonder if there can be a moment when that person re-enters to have some sort of a conversation. They don't need to apologize or anything, but is there anything that needs to be done in the room to kind of name what happened as opposed to just tucking it under the carpet because it came from somewhere? Now, if it came from a totally personal place of I was triggered and I lost my grandmother and I just needed to take a moment, that's one thing. But if it was triggered by something that happened in the room, something that was said or not said, there often needs to be some repair work that's done in the room in order to move forward in a very honest way.
Yeah,
So
and I
that's
couldn't
what I
do.
would investigate, Jim, outside.
Well, I am doing repair work now with that team out after the meeting, but in the moment, I had no tool. I just was like, oh, okay, let's see if we can put the train back on the tracks and just.
And so, Jim, one thing you can do in that situation is to ask that person that coaching question of what do you need right now to re-enter and be present? Or is there something you need from the room? Or,
And
just
what do I say when I'm back in the room? So everyone comes back in, they've seen it, but everything seems to be calm again. Sort of Jim shows up, the client's back at the leadership table. But do I name it then? Do I just say, hey, we just had a moment? Do we have to unpack it?
I would ask the person how they want it to be handled and let that
Yeah.
person drive and direct it. If she says, you can just go back in the room and share that we connected outside and we're all good, fine. Or if you want to invite her to say, sorry, Rana, I had like ask her to be the guide and to direct how he or she wants to re-enter that room.
Thank you.
Sharon.
Thank you, Rae, for always your wisdom. I too had some questions about derailers that you have addressed in different ways. And I'm curious about your techniques for drawing out the profound but maybe silent wisdom from the quieter members in the group.
Such a good question. Wow, you would all love my module on the joy of working with people where everyone has to embody one of these characters and then we go live. It's pretty interesting. I imagine that's a lot like group coaching. So Sharon, if it's on Zoom, I'll just share my Zoom technique and then we'll talk about in the room. So when someone is really quiet on Zoom, because remember, you don't have to necessarily speak virtually to have a voice. You can have a strong voice in the chat. But one of the things I appreciate about virtual work is I can check in with someone on the chat and I'll say something like, I notice we haven't had the opportunity to benefit from your voice or your wisdom. I'd love to invite you in. Not publicly shaming them, not sharing why haven't you contributed yet, you're the only one. But it's like really naming, I've noticed we haven't benefited from your voice. Would love to hear what you think about this situation, either off mute or in chat. And so it's really about an invitation, not anything that's forceful. You can do that in the room as well. It's a little bit more nuanced. So when I do it in the room, what I will do is I will immediately, either during a break, I would say the same thing. I would say, just check in with them. You seem quiet. Would love to hear what you have to say about this. Or I would switch to a modality that has 100% participation. So for example, I would start with a prompt. Like the biggest question I'm sitting with is, or the thing we're not talking about is, and people have to fill in, and then we do a quick whip around where there's 100% participation, or everyone writes it down and does a pair and share, or everyone writes on a note card and then you pass out the note cards to different people. And so you're sharing someone else. Like I would immediately put in a modality that forces 100% participation and tell them, we're going to be doing this and everyone's going to share and right. And so it's just a way of getting every voice in the room, but there's equity in the room because you're not pointing out anyone, you're asking everyone to do the same thing. So that's probably what I do immediately to get every voice in the room. And then I might approach that person during a break and check in and say, I feel like there's some like magical stuff going on in your head and wondering what might be holding you back from sharing it with the room. So from a place of like curiosity and wondering, then like blame and shame, which I know you never do.
Yeah. Thank you, Rae.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to take a question from Peter and I'm going to summarize it. So, because we don't have a whole lot of time left. And this is what I'm very curious about as well. So what can one do when there is somebody of power and authority, maybe the one who actually hired you, whose soapboxes during your facilitation session, during an offsite or whatever, and they just keep talking, but it's the leaders it's the CEO, it's the chairman of the board, or it's somebody like that. And they just keep going. And you're just sitting there on the side, just watching this person, and everyone else is watching this person. They're just going on. What do you suggest?
That's a big
That
one.
is really, really good one. I mean, you're not going to like
Happens a
my
lot.
answer. My answer is it depends, right? I mean, it really depends on the relationship I have with this person.
Yeah.
Where if I have a relationship with this person, I would, again, in that moment, it's very hard. It's very hard to interrupt that person. You probably have to let them finish. Okay. But I would probably at the soonest break
Yeah.
give some very, again, here's what I'm noticing, and here's the impact I think it's having on the team. I think like I'm noticing that you're doing X, Y, and Z, and the impact is I think it's shutting people down. And that is not about motive or intent or values. That is about observable behavior and impact, which is really important. I also think that if you think that might happen, okay, two
Right.
things before the gathering. If you get the sense that this might be a person who wants to do a non-hostile takeover, that's what we call it,
Totally.
right? So first is have a conversation with them beforehand with a very clear request of how you want them to show up in that room. That doesn't necessarily mean with a muzzle, but be very clear about the objectives of the session and what role you want them to play, and then be very clear in the agreements. So, for example, one of my favorite agreements that I put up on the wall is three before me. I don't know if you've heard that before, but three before me means in any gathering or meeting, after you speak, you have to wait until three other people speak until you can speak again. It's a way of having mindful participation and not taking up too much room. I've made up other ones: four before more, 10 before again. 20 is plenty. 20 is plenty when I had to shut someone down, right? Two before you. I'm just making this stuff up. But it's this idea of also if you have like an over talker, direct them right back. That the CEO is not absolved from those agreements either. So if it's something you can preempt, great, but you can also put it up in the agreements, because once it's on the agreements, you can point and say, oh, three before me. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, like in a lighthearted way, but it holds everyone in the room accountable.
Rae, I know there are probably a lot of people wondering how you do your work and where. Maybe you can share like where people can find you, how they can work with you,
Yeah,
and get
sure.
the great benefit of being a student of yours. What's going on in your life? What's the news?
Oh, that's so nice. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So, I have the Ringel Group part of my business, which is all coaching, facilitation, training, and that's where people hire me, companies hire me privately to do all this work within the organization. And then, as many of you know, I've been teaching at Georgetown for 15 years, both in the leadership coaching program and also started the executive certificate program in facilitation, which we ran 16 cohorts for 10 years. And it was just a one of a kind, wonderful, wonderful program. We are no longer at Georgetown, but next Wednesday, I will be announcing a new institutional partnership, which we're so excited about. And we've really spent time like redesigning, immersing with our people, and really rolling out a one-of-a-kind certificate program in the art and craft of facilitation. And it's going to be a lot more of a hybrid program, so both in person and virtual. And
Right.
then also we do a whole bunch of one-day trainings. Julie came and did a one-day training with one of my former students on creative problem solving. We do that about 4 times a year. It's like a one-day intensive on facilitating for creative problem solving. And I have another training that's one day that's just facilitation modalities. It's like 20, one after the next of how you can spice up your meetings. So if you send me an email, I will put you on the distribution list to know about all these things.
Kate, you have the last question, my friend.
So I heard what you said earlier about tossing out the agenda. And what I generally try to do is sort of keep the agenda, but very much flex, be ready to have the longer debrief, the discussion. I find when I totally toss out the agenda that I end up losing some people.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Could you speak to that? It's not really a question, but I'm like, how do you if you decide to toss out the agenda, how do you make sure that no one gets left behind?
So I wouldn't say toss like paper shredder toss, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like a both end. I think there's still parts of the agenda you can do. I just mean if you're at an impasse where you cannot move forward with the agenda because there is a massive elephant in the room that no one's talking about, you don't really have an agenda anymore because people aren't willing to do the work.
Got it. Got it.
So
Okay.
it's a distinction between pivoting between saying these last two items we're going to push to a later meeting because this topic needs more time and it's just too important. We can't make a decision until we work this through. So sometimes it's just shifting the agenda. And then sometimes we're at an impasse and we cannot continue with the agenda
Right.
until we work this out. And part of that is asking the room about their opinion about it, as well. It's been, I think, like, you know, a lot of this is just about practice and trusting your gut and your intuition. The last thought that I'll give you from my end is that for many years people would say like, how do you know to tell that story, or how did you know to make that move, or how, and I would say, well, it's like this bird flies into the window and just whispers the right thing for me to say or the right story to tell. And people would be like, where do you buy the bird? Like, where's the bird? Right? And I'd be like, I don't know, it's just the bird. Until one of my students years ago at Georgetown was like, it's not a bird. You're practicing like a fundamental Buddhist principle. And I was like, I am? Enlighten me. And she said, you are practicing the principle of spontaneity favors the practice mind. And she's like, you know your stuff so well. You're so prepared that everything is available to you. I don't speak from notes. I don't have to think about my next slide because I spend so much time preparing that I'm in flow. And so all of a sudden, like the Julia Roberts examples comes in, or this thing comes in, or that fail that I had, because I'm not thinking about the next word that I'm saying because this is my work. It's just coming from me because I'm so prepared. And so if you're going to do this work, it is not like a wake up in the morning and wing it kind of situation. It is a lot of practice and years that so I can trust myself and trust my intuition. And then I can also trust if I've done something wrong or if I've made a mistake, I can name it and apologize for it and own it. And so like I still love talking about my little bird, but I think I understand now that the bird comes from just a deep, deep commitment to the work and to the craft.
On that note, my goodness, I think I can speak for all of us confidently that we are so grateful for your generosity, your spirit, your heart, and your mastery. You are one of a kind, Rae Ringel, and you blessed us and you showered us with your gifts today. We have to say goodbye to you, but I know it's just soon to be a hello again. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have my emails in the chat, and I'd love to be in touch with any and all of you.
Great. Thank you,
Yay.
Ray.